Welcome to Become a CML Power User, Learn Beyond the CML Basics. We're glad you're here. More about me later. We have a set of distinguished panelists joining us, and we will introduce them in a little bit. First of all, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'll introduce our panel, kick off with that. Then our product manager, Dalton, will give us a CML overview. Then he's going to hand it over to Tom Bryan, who is going to go through how you will become a CML power user by showing a number of cool tricks you may or may not be so familiar with in CML. This whole time, we have a Q&A panel open. So any questions you have as we go through, you'll see it in the WebEx. If you're on the WebEx, there is a Q&A panel. Enter the questions there, and we will have people answering them live during while people are presenting. Then at the end, though, we'll have a set time where I'll open things up, and any questions that our panelists feel are worth getting out there auditorily, we'll ask those questions out loud and get your answers. And then finally, we'll wrap things up with a closing statement and an exclusive offer for everyone who's joined us today. Does that sound okay to everyone? I've seen a few of the little reactions show up here in WebEx, so I know you're listening. Hopefully that's good. There's a thumbs up. So who are we? Well, I'll myself last, but we have Tom Bryan on with us. He's one of the software developers. I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to answer just about anything you throw their way. Our Dalton Ortega is going to be on with us. He's going to do that overview and anything that's roadmap related, what might be coming. I'm just a guy who here very often. I'm a distinguished engineer. I work with the CML team. I'm not actually on the team, but I really love CML. I've been using it since back when it was viral, and I think it's one of the greatest tools we have for being able to simulate, test, model, get to know how networking works, and just the other plus and rapid PBST and third parties. And I model that up in CML with Cisco devices, with third-party devices, so I can really get my hands on how this is working so we can decide whether or not we want to keep going with rapid PBST or if we want to move to something industry standard like multiple spanning tree. And CML made that to do, and happy to be here today. So with that, let me hand things over to Dalton, who's going to do a brief CML overview. So take it away, Dalton.
Thanks, Joe. Like Joe mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about our latest release. We had our version 2.6 come out earlier this year, as a few months ago back in July, and we actually had a maintenance release, the 2.6.1 release. Previously, everything was, you had to house it on either a bare metal or VM workstation. But now you have the ability to deploy it into your own cloud system, into your AWS EC2 environment. So that is new. We also did a pretty big revamp on the workbench and the UI. We had a blog and a video done previously on this, so there's some links we'll send out after the call. Feel free to check those out. They really go through all these new features and changes and that sort of thing. As far as the workbench goes, we did split the ability to create multiple panes and tabs. So previously it was all kind of a single view where if you clicked on a node, that's all you could see. And then to see something else, you'd have to click on that and it would get rid of the view you had previously. But now you can view multiple things simultaneously, like multiple node consoles, or if you wanted to see a couple of consoles and a packet capture on the link between them, you could do that now. So I definitely recommend checking that out, as well as these other videos that we've and blogs that we've done on these new features. And with that, I think we're going to go to Tom. He's going to step us through some cool features in 30 minutes.
Tom, you're on mute. Yeah, practice session does it every time.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me switch to sharing. We're going to, I guess I can show the 10 things. So we're going to run through 10 features here in CML. The assumption here is that everybody is already a CML user. You've got a product. You've started running some network simulations there, and getting into the consoles, using the devices, and whatever you're using that for, data center, service provider, networks, your own cert training. All that's great. And it's very easy to jump in there and focus on that and never touch any of the other features of CML. So today we're actually going to be focused on a bunch of other things around CML that help you get more out of the product, run more on your own local system. These are the 10 features we're going to touch on today, starting with some things just around sharing information, lab description, and lab notes and annotations. Then we'll go through, filtering and tables, just because that's going to be useful throughout. And then some more things around multi-user systems. So we have some stuff here that's going to be specific to CML Enterprise, CML Education customers, like the sharing of labs within a CML system and setting resource limits to control usage on the system. And then we'll go through customizing node definitions, CPU limiting, and then some other things just in the UI, some niceties around how to duplicate nodes, hide kind of clutter links that you don't want to see, and your customizing your console setup. So with that, we will get this started. Sharing the right thing here. And you see my screen?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. All right. So let's get started here. I should have my timer in the corner, actually. Okay, so first of all, lab description and notes. So if I come in here, I'm just going to import, this is the user, me, Tom. I'm going to come into sample labs. I guess a tip for people who've never noticed, there's a list of sample labs in here. So I'm going to just import, say, like the Catalyst 8000B lab. So we have some sample labs in CML. These ones have, some devices with configurations that work as a network. Whether or not you can run all these depends on your resources, but all the feature test labs, these ones that say feature tests, are built to just kind of do some basic feature demo of a functioning lab. But here you can see, if you click on the dropdown, you get this panel. So this is where you can change this lab title. This is what shows up like in your dashboard, in your dashboard view in CML. You can also modify this lab description. So, right. But this is somewhere you can put in anything that you need to, when you're going back trying to find a lab later, or somebody else is looking at a lab, you've handed it to them. That title and description can help folks understand, what is this lab, what's it for. If I come over here to the dashboard view, if I'm in list view, so by default, it's titles view, but you can show list view and have it show, for example, the description and the title. So if you're trying to scan down and find some particular lab, that description can help people understand, what is this lab, what's it for. You're getting a lab off somewhere online. Often want to check that lab description just to see, what is the original author trying to tell me about what this lab is. Another really great way to communicate what your lab's about, or communicate information about the labs that, a network engineer can take this lab, he can look at it, see the topology, click on the devices, look at configs, maybe read your lab description. But sometimes, and especially some people, are going to be much faster at understanding what they're looking at if they have something a little more visual. So I'm going to steal Joe's BGP troubleshooting lab, because it's got a couple nice annotations on it. So annotations, when we say that, we mean non sort of topology, network topology elements in the lab. So ellipsis, like an ellipse, a box, some text here, these little arrows. So all of that is annotation. So you can add those here now in CML 2.6. Again, all this demo is based on CML 2.6. If you're using earlier versions, this looks quite a bit different. But going forward, this is kind of the new look for the UI. So I want to do the demo here on this one. The annotations are here at the left of the workbench toolbar. So draw a rectangle, draw a ellipse. You click one of those tools and just drag and start drawing it. And once you're have that, you can change its border to add a color, whatever you want. Make that border larger so you can actually see it. And then there's transparency here also, so um, I can set this so it's somewhat transparent. Actually, it's more for the internals. Oh, that's an ugly color. Anyway, and I can drag down this opacity, and you can see that kind of fade out. These annotations are stacked, so you see there's a layer number. The topology itself is always going to be kind of sitting on top of all those annotations, but the annotations go from 0, and you're imagining kind of looking down. The one that's 0 is all the way at the bottom. The ones that have a larger number are going to be stacked on top of them. So this one says he's at layer 20. For example, these arrows here are layer 10 and 11. So if I take this annotation and drag him over, you can see I'm kind of now looking through. If I sent this guy all the way to the back, down here to layer 0, now my arrows are kind of coming through clearly because that annotation is behind the other ones. So you can see that from their layer, you need to have some sort of specific stacking or show that kind of see through one layer to the next. But normally what you'd use, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to jump in here a little. So it looks like the annotations as well as the description, annotations certainly because you imported it, but are all those static or saved with the lab? So if you share this lab, if you design something and you want to share it with someone else, you keep all the description, you keep all the annotations with it.
Right. Yes. So if you view CML, you know that if you come up here into lab and download lab, I just get a file that I can use and email to somebody. They can import it into their own CML instance. That's going to include the network topology, the nodes in the topology and the links between them, your annotations, your description. We'll get to the lab guide in a second. So a bunch of these pieces that are in the topology, the only thing it doesn't really preserve is the actual runtime state. So if you have run your lab and you've done stuff on those nodes, that doesn't get bumped up in there. That's a whole bunch of VM state that doesn't get exported or shipped anywhere. But the static description of the topology and then all these other pieces, the lab notes, the description, the guide, all the base configs for the devices that show up here in the if you're starting a node or has never been started before, we've got the config here. This is sort of the bootstrap config that's preserved also. The normal use for these annotations is, like I said, to try to communicate something about the topology to someone you're sharing it with, or to remind yourself later when you come back, like, what was this thing about? So here, Joe's got the autonomous system numbers. And also a little bit of highlights, since it's a troubleshooting lab, that hey, these two peers are flapping. So normally you want to use this to communicate that sort of information. It's entirely free form. You can decide rounded corners, not colors, text wherever you want. It's not tied to the node. So if I move a node around right now, this is not attached in any way. That's, I don't know, something that we can talk about later. And then the other thing, yes, I was going to mention that if you want to, once you get in here, you kind of understand this lab, you want to start working with topology. If you want those out of the way, this settings here has one of these buttons is for shutting off the annotations. You can just hide them. They're still there. They're in the topology. I can bring them back. But this way I can just focus on the lab, work on the topology, or interacting with it. If I need to see these, I can bring them back. Sometimes the annotations are a little bit too much clutter, but it's up to you. They're there. This is just letting you hide them digitally within the user interface. The other spot where you can communicate information to folks, which I didn't mention when we were talking about the description, is this section down here, we call it the lab guide. I think in earlier versions, this may have been called lab notes. But this actually is probably not well known, so maybe not as well used. But if you actually wanted to give people some sort of steps here, also don't forget when you're adding fields in CML to always apply those changes, or click the save button if there's a save button. But basically, I can put a lot more text in here. It's kind of free form, but in general, when I come into a lab, I'm in viewer mode, and that text gets rendered in Markdown. So if you had actual steps you wanted someone to go through with the lab or something, this may come up later if we start building out more library of labs for people to play with. You'll want to look at the lab guide here to look at these kind of steps and whatever somebody's identified in here for information. I think we have that also in the feature test labs. The lab guide kind of explains which features were demonstrated or tested by that particular topology, with links off to the actual CML documentation. All right, moving on. Oh, I did mention here that we have the, we might want to put the description in here. Right now, it's not too bad. So this makes more sense probably on a multi-user system, but as an admin, I can decide whether or not to show labs from all my users. So I'm seeing both the ones owned by me, by some demo user, by the admin user who I'm currently logged in, Tom, the actual me. I can see all those in here. All of these tables in CML you'll see now in, I forget since when, 2.3 maybe? In addition to being able to sort, so I can say, oh, just sort of group this by the lab owner. I can also filter, so I can say, right now we just want to look at Tom's labs. So you can set filters on these or filter for just the labs that, if some of these have been run, but some of them not, you can filter on the ones that currently are running. If you want to see what all is running on your system, I think right now I shut everything off. Yeah. Everything's shut off and wiped. But once we have things running, you'll get a list of show me the running lab, show those sorts of things. So we'll see this more throughout the discussion. The next piece is lab sharing. So I said I've got Tom here. I also have in this other tab, we'll log in as Joe. Finally shared his password. Joe right now, well, he doesn't have anything in here, but sample labs, I can grab a lab in here. But you'll notice that if he has show all set, he's not seeing anything, just this one lab, just the one he imported. By default, your users, a non-admin user in CML, can only see his own labs. That's by design. We don't want people to accidentally be seeing things they're not supposed to. If you're an admin user, as I said, if I in here I can see everybody's. If I want the
hey, Tom, sorry to bust in on you. There's been a few reports of people not being able to see what you're sharing. I can. So maybe just that might kick it. Like I said, I had no issues. I was following all the way through. Yep, it's coming back. Hopefully we can get some of those technical issues ironed out, but at least now, again, I can see it. So let's try that for now.
Yeah, previously I was sharing the screen, so now I just shared Chrome. So I think everything I'm doing is in Chrome, so that maybe that helps. I see there's some thumbs ups coming through. Okay, so we were talking about sharing. So like I said, as a user here, Joe, very sadly, can only see his own labs. Maybe he'd like to see this BGP lab that I imported, which is good because it's his. So if I'm on a multi-user system like this, as an admin, I can come into the system maintenance, this tool's system administration page. It drops me into system maintenance, but down here I've got the user administration, but I also have group administration. So if you haven't used this, actually we'll just go through and recreate this one. So if I come in here and add the group, webinar group, so this is just my it's a stepper here, like a multi-step wizard. So first I create the group, I give it a name. I can just create it at that point if I want to start there, but I know that I want to add some users into this. So let me add both Joe and Tom to this group. Tom, Joe. Actually, not that Tom, this Tom, and Dalton. Also on the system. So all three of these guys are in a group. You can also add specific labs that you want all the people to be able to see. We're not going to do that right now. We'll just create the group as is. So now we've got a group. I'm going to log out as the admin, come back in as myself. Oops. All right, so now we go back into this lab. As always in CML 2.6, I've got the lab menu here. Note that also if I right-click anywhere on the canvas in the workbench, not touching a node, like with nothing selected, if I right-click on a node, I get the actions on the node. If I right-click on the canvas, that gives me the same menu here as this lab menu. I've got the option here to set permissions. And this is where if you're on a system that has groups created, I can select groups. So I'm going to share this webinar, this particular lab, the lab I'm currently in, with the webinar group. So now, if Joe comes in here and looks, he can now see this lab. It's only going to be shown if he has show all selected. So by default, it just shows his own, as always. But if he selects show all, he can now see this lab, the BGP troubleshooting lab.
That is cool. Two things here, Tom. So I noticed that Joe's screen doesn't burn my retinas as much. So it looks like we've got a dark mode setting. Is that per user, or is that just per the overall session?
So this is actually stored up at the in the browser itself. Since I have this incognito one, it's going to be separated out. But yeah, I think if I set this to dark mode, it's certainly saved per user. I think it might currently be persisting a little longer than it should, because I noticed when I switched users one time, it seemed to stay. But if you're a user and you're on a specific system, if you set this, you log out, you log back into this instance, you should still be in dark mode.
Cool. And so you shared this lab with me in read-only mode. What does that mean? Am I able to, like, let's say I need to fix the problem there with the peers flapping. Can I do that? Can I configure the devices, or am I just able to look at the lab?
Right. So I can look at the lab. If I try to change anything here, like I want to change this name of this node, whatever, I'll just get an error saying I don't have right permissions. So that change is not actually made. The node is still called R2. I can also hear. I can also hear.
Now your share just went gray for me, at least.
Yeah, I went to my hot corner to block my screen. Sorry about that. If I try to start the lab, same thing. Starting and stopping nodes is also not permitted if you have read-only. We'll show one thing here. I'm going to pop back to the actual user who owns this lab. And he's going to go start the lab. So now, of course, he owns the lab. The owner can always do whatever they want with the lab. But anybody else in this share group who only has read-only permissions, I can't start nodes, I can't stop nodes, I can't modify the topology. Once the lab is started, I can console to those devices, and I can interact with the console. I can change the config on the running devices. I can do packet captures. I just can't modify the lab or start and stop links or nodes or anything in the lab itself.
That's cool as a teaching tool. If you wanted to create a lab and have students or others try to fix it without getting too distracted, that's a nice feature.
Yeah, it's a good troubleshooting one. Or if you have a bunch of sort of junior engineers who are going to be sharing a lab, maybe the team lead wants to start a lab, have everybody be able to come in and collaborate and look at things and see what each other are doing. As always, the consoles are multiplexed. It's going to take a minute for these guys to get all the way up, but I'm seeing this in this lab. Which device was that on? This is R2. Open console over here at R2. And then as soon as this guy's up, anything I do in one of these consoles, I'm going to be able to do in the other, or going to see in the other console, because those consoles all through the back end go through a multiplex. So whether I'm here, we'll look at a couple of the things about the console connections later. But yeah, the console here, if I start doing stuff, on the other side, I see that happening also. And we see the flapping, as we know from BGP Lab. I'm going to come back in here as admin real quick. If I'm the admin user, actually, no. Sorry. I don't need the admin. I can still be Tom. Sorry, skipping ahead too much. I can change the permissions here and say, oh, I want to give everybody in that group read-write access. And this I might want to do if I have a group where I'm collaborating with some people to actually create the topology, or we're just a small team, so we sit right next to each other, we talk all the time, it's fine. Once I've set this to be read-write, then you can do everything you want. You can, move nodes, change things in here, whatever you want. Every change you make is going to be saved. So as you make it, so whatever, move this guy way over here, grab these guys, and move those annotations, and that'll be immediately visible on the other side. So that's that piece. Console sharing, read only, read write. Let's see, next topic. So that one's a little bit complicated, but it's super useful if you're in a either, like Joe said, an education setting, or if you're in a large group where you've got a bunch of different people who need to get into some big lab that's modeling your actual production network. Maybe you just want to run that once, have capacity to run it just once, and then everybody just gets to share that and go in there and see it. Another piece here that is useful, this is where I meant to log out for the admin section. So this coming back to the CML personal users and also CML enterprise customers. CML ships with a set of virtual machine images and node types. We call these node definitions that define what is this type of thing that you're going to be able to drag and drop. These are the things that show up in your add nodes palette when you're creating a lab. What are these things? What are their settings? If you've created one of these by hand before, you know that you have to kind of come in here and tell us, what type of disk driver, what type of network driver, how many interfaces, what are the interface names, so that CML can match that up with what the actual virtual machine has. These are good defaults. They work fine. We give you a bunch of different node definitions for IOSVs, XE images. We now have the Cat9K beta image in CML 2.6. But we also have, as an admin, the ability here to say, these built-in ones are great, but I'm going to switch this to rewrite. We mentioned here in the description, I'm not sure how many people noticed, the iOS XRV 9000 defaults to its recommended settings. That's currently 4 vCPUs and 20 gig of RAM. And that's what it gets allocated. It's allowed to use that much. And actually, it's probably more like 12 these days. But if your use cases are much more modest, you don't actually have to do that. You can come in here and change this node definition, which you have already done. So you can drop it down. This is all the way down to its minimum. So normally it's at 4 and 20 gig, basically. But we're going to drop it all the way down to 12 gigabyte, 2 vCPUs. And then, as always, I need to actually save that change. The node definition's now been updated. So just as an admin, I come in here, create a lab. I always like to give it a nice title. And we're going to add just XRV 9000 node to the canvas. It's up here somewhere. And I'm not going to even add config or other devices. I just want to get this thing started so that I can check in here. As the admin, certainly under sysadmin, there's a node administration tab where I can see things across the entire network. So I'm going to, as I said before, I can filter things. So I just want to look at things that are started. Here's my XRV 9000 node. This little gear icon, another thing on table, sometimes we don't by default show all of the columns. So there's maybe additional columns that you can show. Some of the ones here are this CPU and RAM setting that's, I think, not normally shown by default, but I've got it enabled here so we can see when this one's starting, it's being allocated to vCPUs and 12 gig of RAM. It's not necessarily using that much, but that's what that virtual machine has been allocated, able to use. So that setting takes effect. You can do that as an individual user on a specific node. If I drag a node onto the canvas, CSR 1000V, if you know that you have a node that permits like varying amounts of memory and CPU, you can come in here and just on this particular node in my lab set it. But if you want to set it for your whole entire system, every time I launch these things, then you would go into the node definition you can switch it to read write and make that change here. It's in the native simulation part where it talks about the memory CPU amount. That, especially on a smaller system, can help you get a lot more out of your system. There's another way we can get more out of the system. So I'm going to jump over to, actually, I'm going to stop that one because the XRV takes forever to boot. Stopping that now. So we're going to jump.
How would you gauge what you might be able to tweak that down to? Because it's you're right, a great thing for being able to get more out of the system. But how might you figure out what your floor is, so to speak?
Yeah, great question, Joe. So the out here in the documentation for CML, you'll see there's a section on VM images for CML labs. So here we include some information about each of these different node types, information about what it's, what it is, links to documentation, if there specific documentation about which features are supported, any known limitations. And then sometimes we'll have tips and tricks in here also about specific things that our users have found helpful about running these nodes in the Cisco Modeling Labs. But generally, this is going to be on a per node type basis. Each VM type, each actually version of VM might have different resource limits. So you can just follow through these links to say their release notes for that particular image and say, okay, what do they say in their release notes about? I think we're running 7.7 here. And they'll have sort of min-max. It's one socket, minimum of 2, recommended 4. So CML goes with the recommended by default, but it lists its minimum out here. So you do have to drill down into the docs, but yeah, that's always available.
That's good too. And I guess it also depends on what you're running too. If you're not going to be doing a lot, you may be able to get away with a lot less resources.
Right. Yeah. It depends entirely on what the what that specific what your specific configs and topologies you're running there, how big those things are. So we're going to look at another part around how you control resources. This one is a little more focused on the enterprise or multi-user system. It's very useful also in like a university environment, but this also helps me set up the environment I need so that I can show something that's very useful for personal edition users. So bear with us for a second if you're a CML personal only user. I'm still in here as the admin. I'm going to go into tools. We talked originally about the group administration. These are groups for sharing labs. We also have something called resource pools. So I'm going to kill these pools for now and rebuild them so that you can see the actual construction. So the resource pools is a way to say my system, how much does my system have? Looking here, it has 24 vCPUs. I've got 62 gigabyte or 64 gig of RAM. So, and then I have a certain number of licensed nodes. I may have on an enterprise system licensed 50 nodes across my whole entire system. If I have multiple users running there, I may want to make sure that one person doesn't go and eat up all the resources on the entire system. So resource pools are a way to say, to basically limit what folks can do. So we're going to create a resource group. All resource pools have to have a template. By default, there's no template on the system, so I'm going to just create one. I'm just going to say no restrictions base. It's just a base template. Base template. No restrictions. So this one's not setting any limitations at all. It's just there to be like a top level thing. If I wanted to be able to control something across the whole system and everything that kind of inherits from this template is going to pick up the settings, I can set those at this level, and then everybody underneath will pick them up. But we're going to do it this way for today. So I've got this base. Once I have a template in the system, I can add an actual resource pool based on that template. So base it on the template. You have the option to either create a pool where it's going to be a bunch of people who share these resources, or I can create resource pools for multiple different users that all have the same settings at once. So that's what I'm going to do here. I say we're doing individual pools and do a 5 CPU pool, and we're going to limit it to just 5 CPUs. And then, as always, if we have a stepper here, we can step through. I'm going to actually add Joe to this group, add Dalton to this group. Tom's cool, so I'm going to let him run as much as he wants. So what this is now saying is that if the system has the resources, it could be that you have so many users that even setting 5 per user, they're among all the users, they're going to eat up everything on your system, but one user can't do that. Joe can only use up to 5 CPUs. So if I jump back over here to Joe, so not this lab, we'll do something smaller. Do the sample lab IOSD. Right. So we can see this lab here. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each of these node types has a node definition that says they take 1 CPU. So if I launch this whole lab, this is going to be too much. And we're going to do this. Let me just grab a few of these. These ones will start, right? I've got 5, so I can start these. This just lets me show the multi-action. So if I click Shift and then drag, I can do a box selection and select multiple things. And then I can right-click on that, and it'll say I've got 4 links, selected, 5 nodes selected. If I want, I can start all those nodes just here. So that multi selection action free tip. It's not even on the list. So now we're starting these things. If I tried to, now that these things are getting into their, starting up. Let me look at the nodes pane. They're going here from, hey, I'm just sitting on the system to, okay, I'm actually starting these nodes up. If I now try to start this 6th node, remember, I'm in a resource pool that only limits me to 5. That's based on the nominal resource usage of, oh, did we do that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's jump back. Find its user Joe. Oh, I did not finish creating it. Okay, we're going to stop this lab.
So while you're doing that, so Joe seems to be a pretty greedy user here. Just for clarity for the audience, you put Dalton and I in this group. If I've eaten up all 5 of those CPUs, will Dalton be able to use any of them?
If it's a shared group, no. If you and Dalton are both in a group, then you share that pool. If you use 5, then Dalton gets none. What I did when I created this resource pool is say create individual ones. That's just a convenience method for the admin to be able to create multiple different groups with identical settings. So you see I've got 1 here for Joe, 1 here for Dalton. So you each have a group, a resource pool, and each of you has 5. This is not slicing out the system, it's just putting a limit. So if you have a system that has 20 CPUs and you've got 20 users, I can say each of those 20 users gets 5 CPUs. That would be a total of 100. You don't have that much on your system. It just says none of those users can use, all 20. They can only use 5. Now they've actually created it, we're going to do this again. Start this. Start. And like I said, these things get queued as usual. CML starts starting them up. And then once I see for them, we can actually watch this even in the resource limits. If you're a user in a resource pool, you'll see it here, and you'll see, you can track, like, what is my current usage? It shows you've got this resource pool here is at infinite. So, I'm currently, whatever I'm currently running, but my limit is infinite. But this one is showing me, no, it's actually set to 5. Now I'm using 5 out of 5 of that resource. So if I come back into this lab, and the nodes aren't even fully booted, just once they start starting up, they're counted against your limit. So if I now try to start this 6th node, now I get this error. So it's useful to look at that error if you're using resource limits on your system. To make this a little bit bigger, it says that failed to start. What thing it was trying to get was a CPU, and if I ran this node, it would put me at 600 out of the 500. So 500 is my limit. If I add this one, it's going to be 600. That 600 is sort of a number of CPU cores times 100. And the reason we do that is that it makes this next bit easier to talk about. So I'm going to stop IOSV 0. IOSV is a pretty lightweight node. So we can actually say, even though the node type says he requires a full CPU, I can limit it. I can say, actually, for this node, for these specific nodes I'm going to run, just give them half a CPU. It still wants a CPU, so that means it might run a little slower. It might respond a little more slowly. But this means that on this running system, it's going to not be able to consume a full CPU core. I can't actually change these sorts of settings on a node that has state. Anything that's been run and then stopped, it has this little X icon here in the UI. I might have to wipe that to change a setting. That's fairly common in CML. So now that I've wiped it, I can change the setting and set this to say only use half of what your normal CPU. And this is half of its base setting. So if this were an IOS XR V9000 node, half of 2 would be 1, right? This one is a 1 CPU node, so it's going to be 50% of 1, so it's just a half. And then same thing here on the IOS V1, I'm setting this to a half. So my 2 IOS V nodes in this lab are now going to be running with 50% of the CPU allocation. I start them both now. I'm now going to be permitted to start them both. If I look in the resource limit, you'll see it initially says 4.5 out of 5, because that node coming up was only using a half. And now the last node, the 6th node, is going to start up and bump me up to 5. And you can see that also in your lab. I jump back into this lab. Yeah, I think I need to add this in my dropdown. You can see your CPU limit here. Yeah, which guys are currently at 100%. These 2 nodes are limited at 50%. So that's an easy way to see what your limits are set to. But this is I did this in terms of the resource pool, just to demonstrate the fact that the resource pool limits what Joe can run. And then the CPU limiting, this setting on the node itself, this is something anybody can use. You can use this outside of the resource pool, resource restrictions. If you're just running on a small system and you're trying to run as much as you can, and you're almost just one more node and then the lab will be running, you can stop that lab, wipe some nodes, and then try to set these CPU limits down to 80%, 50%, and get a few more nodes running on your system. Okay, that is probably the last of the really complicated ones we've got. We're just going to run through a few quick things here that are going to be just sort of UI functionality. So this should be pop through pretty quickly. I'm going to stay as Joe here just because I know Joe likes the, he doesn't like the, whatever, bright white thing burning his eyeballs. So if I come in here and I add a node, IOC, do that, drag them on the canvas. If I have some settings here, this is probably less common with something like a router, but we'll do it here. Set R, config, something, this will be, if I had some basic, boilerplate config, I wanted all these things to always have, console logging or something. What's the word? Logging console? Wow.
That's it, logging console.
Logging. Whatever. If I have a set of things, this is very common if you have like a host node, you have certain packages you want in there. I might want to say, I want to take this thing, and maybe, like I said, the IOSV nodes, maybe for my particular lab, this one, I want to make sure that they're only using, 60% of the CPU limit, whatever. A bunch of settings I want to have kind of custom for this particular lab. I can now take this node, and there's a clone button here, so I can click this and clone out that node multiple times. And you'll see it just depends, like the _0, 1, 2. But each of these guys has that 60% CPU limit. It's got the whatever my base config in here was. So any sort of settings over here on the settings pane get cloned with that. So if you have certain settings that for a particular lab you want to set, you can do that through this clone functionality. If you're just trying to add a bunch of nodes to the canvas, just by default, in CML 2.6, you don't have to do that through the clone. You can just come up here to the bulk and say that you want to add, a bunch of IOSV nodes or something. I want these things to be called R. And then I want to add whatever. We showed that before, but yeah. If you just like the default, you're just trying to add a bunch, you can use the bulk mode of this add nodes. Otherwise, that clone is very useful because you can do a bunch of settings first and then copy those, duplicating those settings. The other one, I'm going to jump back to the this lab here. No, I'm going to import one lab. Last lab for importing at the time. This is one of the labs over in DevNet Sandbox. So this is a fine lab. Unfortunately, you look at it, your eyes kind of bleed. It's a little hard to see kind of what's going on here. And part of the reason for that is that all these different devices in this environment want to go out to this unmanned switch so that they can get out through an external connector, which lets me get direct in-band access to the devices. So if I'm trying to do some PyTS work or automation work, testing from my local laptop into this lab, maybe I put that, this external connector into bridge mode, and then I can go through that into this topology, which is great. I get this out-of-band access into all these guys through these connections. But when I'm looking at the lab, that's really hard to look at. So one of my options here is to hide my links for that node. Okay. Now we can kind of focus on the actual lab, right? So that those links are still there. Again, this is just a visual hiding in the lab. I can just bring it right back with show links. I think that setting is actually even preserved with the lab. So if I hide them and share this lab, if somebody shares the lab with you and you see if you see a node in your topology that's kind of weirdly kind of grayed out when you select it, it has no links to anywhere, it's hiding this link. That kind of partially grayed out version of that node means that the hide links has been enabled for that node. You have to right click and show links to show all the links. But this is very useful if you have a topology where you have this sort of thing where you have lots of out-of-band access or something, lots of things connected to one device, and it's just making it very cluttered. You can take things that you're not focused on right now or that you don't need to look at right now, and that gives you a lot of a much cleaner look at the rest of the topology. That's the hide. We did the clone. I think one of the last things here is I will jump into IOC, jump into Wix consoles. As we said in 2.6, or as Dalton said, now we have that panes view. This is where the consoles open up. And you can, if you haven't seen this, if you haven't jumped to CML 2.6 yet, you get this kind of, need to add one first. You can split up your consoles so that they are, you're free just to open it over there. But you can actually even drag these if you want around. Let me open one more. So you've got consoles, you can move them around, you can do these things. But there are certain settings that you might not notice. You have to right click on the tab itself, and you'll get this menu with various settings. You can with a specific console, if you don't like the default name for that console, you can rename it so it calls it something else. One of the good settings that's been here for a long time is these global console settings. So, for example, you'll notice every time I open a console, it's just a blank thing that says click to connect. I like that to be enabled because I work on some labs where there are lots of nodes, and as I click on things and set settings on them, I don't want consoles to be opening and closing every time I pop a console open. But if I leave these mostly closed, I might want to set that. Load on connect. Sorry, that's the history. Auto connect is my actual connection. So if I kill this ISP1 console, then I open it back up. I think I didn't say that, did I? Yeah, auto connect. Always make sure you quit save. Sorry, I'm zoomed in a little bit from my normal. Normally when I open a console, I would have to click something, but once I say auto connect, as soon as you open the console, it just drops you right in. So if you hate that extra button click, it's just right here, right click, console, auto connect. The history, you're seeing like lines that had happened before you connected to the device. That's this load on connect setting. And then if you want to fix the size of the console, you can do that here. That's a global setting, so it applies to all your consoles you're using in CML. But yeah, if you have something that you want to set and you like that for all your consoles, you can do that here, including things like switching. I think we have a few themes in there, or whatever. Go all retro on things. Yeah. The only other thing that's going to say that gets us through sort of our 10 things, it's maybe a little longer than 30 minutes today, The little extra bonus here, some of you may have seen this if you've caught us at Cisco Live, but this is a very big lab. It's demonstrating a little bit about the fact that we have, for enterprise education customers, we have these cluster deployments we have had since last year. So this one is a large cluster, bare metal cluster with 8 UCS servers, fairly hefty, like 80 vCPUs on each one. And I can then tell CML, like, oh, just go start this lab. And it's going to starting up these nodes. You'll see them start kind of going into their starting state, just like usual. But those guys are, just filter this for the ones that are actually starting. Thank you. So you see as they start, they're kind of showing up, and you see that they're actually landing on different computes, M3, M4. So CML is just allocating these nodes to different servers in this cluster. So if you haven't seen it yet, especially if you're, we talked about how to squeeze more onto a smaller system. Another way to scale a CML system is to just add more computes if you're running CML Enterprise or CML Education. So that's it today. I think stop sharing these. I think that we've hit all of these 10 items plus the 11th.
Yes, you did. When you catch your breath, you've been doing a lot with sample labs on here, and so for one of our Q&As that's apparently very popular, and I've been kind of looking at the panel. It seems people are interested. Talk to us a little bit more about sample labs. So you said some of them are included with CML, and you showed that little tool, sample labs. Where else can people find sample labs, or where can people start to think about how they might contribute some sample labs for CML?
Yeah, great question. So the sample labs built into CML, that's something that we put in there. This has actually been around since the very first release of CML 2.0. Yeah, let me just share real quick again. So that's under tool sample. That's just what we provide with the product. It's currently a fixed list. The key ones that actually have a bunch of config in them are all these feature test ones. These are actually ones that we use when we're releasing CML to verify that a new version of CML hasn't broken anything that would work in previous versions. That the topology themselves, like if we grab a new version of an image, like a new ASAV image or a new Catalyst 8K image, we'd like to make sure the features in there still work the way we expect them, at least the basic ones. So those labs, I think, are some of the kind of more fully fleshed out labs. We would like to start building out more library topologies. A great place to look for that is out here under the contributed. This is not just anybody can send us a pull request or contact us through the site and suggest, hey, I've got this lab I'd like to share. We'd love to have it. This is public. Anybody can access this. You don't even need a GitHub account. Just download, you can grab it from here, lab topology, download the lab, import it into CML. If somebody emails you a lab or you get it from a book or something else, same way, once you get it on your system, you can just use import. These ones that are in CML by default, that's just a fixed list that's bundled with the product. But you can always grab things from collections like this one out here. I don't remember if we actually linked directly to that. It's certainly here on this VM images page. So if you're on the VM image page for CML, if you scroll way to the bottom, we talk about additional images. Like if you have access to things other than the ones we ship with CML, third-party VMs, Fortinet firewall, Juniper stuff, people have contributed, no definitions for these things. And those are, many of those are available out here on the CML community repository. So we do mention it on this page. If you need that link, you can just get it right from there. This one jumps you into the actual repository, and then no definitions are there, but lab topologies are here. And there's some even bigger, these are some use cases that have like topologies with, these are linked out to other people's things, because it's usually a topology plus like a whole bunch of other stuff going on. How to use CML with Ansible, or a whole SD-WAN DevOps setup. So those usually can include a topology, but they probably include a whole bunch of other stuff if you wanted to look it through like a more worked example on some topic.
That's fantastic. Yes, I encourage people as well, like you did, to contribute not just sample topologies, but those node definitions.
Yeah.
CML is essentially a KVM or orchestration on a KVM hypervisor. So if you know something that runs in KVM that's not here, and you'd like to make it easier for people to get into CML, to get it into CML, that would be great. I know our
Yeah.
community would appreciate it.
Yeah, if you download some VM, open source, other vendor, whatever, you can't, and you need to set it up in CML, I would jump here first, check to see if there's already a node definition. If there's not, go ahead and create one. And once you've got it working, then yeah, send it to us, send us a pull request, or just contact us through the page and say, I don't know how to do a pull request, but here's this node def. Can you please add it?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tom. I think that I want to thank Ramal and Justin as well. They've been very busy from what I've been able to see in the Q&A panel. So again, a lot of interest here, and I want to thank everyone for being on our webinar today. If you want to make me presenter, Tom, I'll take us on. There we go. So we went through everything. Tom, you were fantastic at hitting everything, including the bonus clustering. Now for an exclusive offer for everyone who can hear my voice and see this screen. We are looking for your feedback, and in exchange, we want to give you early access to the next release of CML. And I can say that the upcoming release, 2.7, which should be out early next year, has some pretty cool new features in it, especially with respect to being able to do more with less resources. So scan that QR code, reach out to us, and we will help you help us, essentially help you get early access and then give us that feedback so we can continue to make CML the best possible product. And I guess I'll leave it up here for a few more seconds for people whipping out their camera phones to take a picture of that QR code.
The slides will also be posted with there's like a community thread in the CML community on the Cisco Learning Network. So the slides will, I don't know if it's right after this, but at least later this week, the whole slide deck will be up there.
Excellent point. Yes, you need not scan it now. Carlo will be posting everything to the community. So how do you stay connected? You can clearly become a beta tester, and that is definitely a way to stay connected with us. Many of us, I think Justin, myself, we are going to be in with Ralph, another one of the technical leaders, the developers on CML in Amsterdam for Cisco Live Europe. If you're going to be there, we're going to be talking about CML in the Learning and Certifications booth, as well as running a lab. Tom mentioned it in those use cases in the CML community. Our lab on using Ansible and CML to do CI/CD testing of network changes. So definitely, if you're going to be at Cisco Live, come and say hi and check us out. If you're not going to be at Cisco Live in Amsterdam, if you're more Americas based, we're also going to be attending Cisco Live in the US later on in the summer. So come on out to the desert, see us in Vegas, and we can have the same type of conversations. And by then, CML 2.7 will be out so we can talk about some of those features as well. Between the two, we're going to have another webinar. We're targeting February after Cisco Live Amsterdam, where we're going to be able to talk about some of those new 2.7 features and get you excited for what we've got coming after 2.7. So reach out, as Tom mentioned, if you have things you want to contribute to the community, either do a pull request, contact us, scan that QR code, become a beta tester, and seek us out. If not in the Cisco Learning Network community, at Cisco Live, in email, follow us on, we've got a YouTube channel doing some videos about CML. There are a lot of ways to connect with the CML team. Again, we are very happy you decided to join us this afternoon or this morning or this evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much, and we look forward to talking to you later. Thanks.